Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orrett Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening overseas via the web, whether you're in your vehicles on your way to work, or if you're at home and getting ready for work, or if you're already at work. Again, we want to thank you for allowing us into your homes, into your offices, and into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands. Today's Friday, February 13th, 2015, and for those of you who are superstitious, I say to you, don't be superstitious. Just treat it as any other day, or think of it as the day before Valentine's Day. And get it out of your mind, because more than likely, if something happens that's on the downside today, you're going to blame it on because it's Friday the 13th. So please don't do that today. Of course, For the Record is a show designed and produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is designed specifically to keep you up to speed in terms of what's happening not only locally but regionally and internationally as well. I am your host, Orrett Connor, and you can always join me on For the Record every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. unless those days fall on a holiday, which will happen next week Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, so we won't have a show on Ash Wednesday. But you can always join me on For the Record, and as we say, this is your radio station. This is your For the Record, so our phone lines are always open, and there is always someone waiting to take your call. 9 times out of 10, it's the beautiful voice of Miss Susan Watson. We also, based on the generosity of Lime, we have a toll-free number that you can call us on, which is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at our email address, which is For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. As usual, For the Record has promised to give you access to your legislators, to policymakers, to those who implement policy as well. And as we said, we want to keep you up to speed in terms of what's happening regionally, locally, and internationally as well. So this morning, we have in our studio 2 guests who will be talking about CONCACAF, talking about CONCACAF's activities in the Cayman Islands, talking about the great work that the president of CONCACAF is doing, Mr. Jeff Webb. And those persons, I'd like to introduce them right away. I'm not going to mince any words this morning. We're going to go straight into things. I'm going to first introduce Mrs. Theresa Pitcairn, who is the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF. And also we have the honor and pleasure of having Mr. Cline, C.G. Glidden Jr. in the studio with us this morning. Mr. Glidden, of course, you know, is a former member of the Legislative Assembly, representing the District of West Bay, also a former speaker Deputy Speaker, of the Legislative Assembly as well. So we want to welcome Mr. Glidden with us this morning. And you may wonder, well, you know, what does he know about CONCACAF? What is his involvement with CONCACAF? Well, I'm here to tell you that CG has been working with CONCACAF's president, Mr. Jeff Webb, based, and is all based on his previous involvement in football. So if you think that he is not eminently qualified to talk about CONCACAF and football, you are wrong, because he is, and he will demonstrate that to you this morning as well. And I also want to, hand out some kudos to him, in terms of his testimonial about colon cancer, as well. And for those of you who attended the Lions event that was held in the town hall, he was certainly there, and we want to again thank him for his testimonial and his raising of awareness of colon cancer in the Cayman Islands. So without any further ado, Miss Theresa, I want to say good morning and welcome for the first time on For the Record.
Well, I may not even come back because I may take exception from what you said just now. You have the pleasure of introducing CG. You don't have the pleasure of introducing me too.
Yes, I did. I did that first.
No. Jokes aside, this is truly an honor. It's a really beautiful day, and thank you very, very much for having me, and certainly CG on this edition of For the Record. Just by way of background, so that you know what I have been up to, recently in my involvement with CONCACAF. As I started to explain when I got in just now, that President Webb invited me to consider the position of sports integrity, to get involved with that, because the whole issue of match fixing, people were taking the view that this was destroying what is called the beautiful game, and through gambling. And we talked a little bit about it, and we talked about perhaps ways in which I could add some value to developing sports integrity. One of the things that you will notice about this gentleman, and I'm going to take this opportunity to say that he's a dynamic guy. He's our Caymanian guy. He's charming, he's engaging, he's intelligent, he's curious, and he is courageous. To see what he has done with CONCACAF in the 2 years that he's been there is just sheer phenomenal. And then you wonder how he does it. The guy never sleeps. He travels and he works, and he expects you to work as hard as he does. And his work ethic is also equally high. Since President Webb has been in CONCACAF, you will see that he's created, like I said, the forerunner with trying to change the image of CONCACAF, bringing it into an institution that has proper governance, proper transparency, having proper audits, and so on, to get away from the challenging past that CONCACAF experienced. And when I say that he's a courageous guy, he's the first guy to actually address things like discrimination in the sports. So it takes, as the term that I borrowed from Wally many years ago, testicular fortitude. I mean, it's now become commonplace, but I really got that term from Wallin. He has a tremendous respect for the game, but he loves these islands. And what CG and I will try to do today is to give you an example, not only of his love for these islands, but to demonstrate what one individual can do who has a vision that is designed to change the trajectory of our islands in a positive way. So that's just a little bit about my background.
Okay. Mr. Glidden, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Thanks, OC. Thanks for that. We're kind. Those words of introduction and welcome. I just want to thank you for, again, hosting us on the show. As Theresa said, I think Cayman, it's starting to get a flavor, a feel for the potential benefits of having a relationship and having a son of the Cayman Islands as president of CONCACAF. I think it's important for us all to know, while we're talking about him being president of CONCACAF, he's also a vice president of FIFA. Mm-hmm. And like I said, there's no real end of opportunities. So in the past, we've looked at more, or what we've seen is benefits like major tournaments, major events being held in Cayman. And I think we all recognize the potential for that and the benefit to our young people and the opportunities that affords them. And we've seen coaching seminars and refereeing seminars, and a lot of things are happening in the football world in terms of Cayman. But it's important for those people who mightn't be as involved to recognize the widespread of opportunities for Cayman, not only in terms of people that actually play football. And so when we see, I don't know how much football Theresa played, for example, but we see an involvement at various levels across, where we're introducing and exposing our Caymanians to opportunities and to events that they wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. Mm-hmm. And whether that's sitting on committees that are meeting every month in Zurich or around the world and getting exposed to different areas of business. Because when we look at football, it's not just the beautiful game that is mentioned and playing on the field. It's all the business of football, which is arguably one of the biggest businesses in the world, right? And so what we're seeing here with the latest announcement from President Webb is an initiative that, like Theresa said, we look forward to discussing in terms of how it will impact Cayman on a much broader spectrum and get a lot more people involved and provide a lot more opportunities than just for those people who may actually participate in a beautiful game on the field.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of, Theresa's the question of whether or not she played, football, we're starting to see now worldwide more and more involvement in terms of women, playing football as well. Cayman may have been late in the game,
sure,
in terms of that, but, we're certainly seeing that happen. I'm sure that when Theresa was in primary school, girls playing football at that point in time was probably something that you didn't see much about, but we'll let Theresa comment on that.
But just before Theresa gets upset with me, I simply use that as an example to say that there's so much opportunities for people to get involved, even for those who might not either have played or play the sport, and they can contribute in a wide range of ways, and that's what we wanted to discuss, because we don't want it to get to seem like there's any one particular area of contribution or benefits that will flow. And so I, comfortably use Theresa as an example of maybe someone who hasn't, been playing football, who obviously has kids involved from a parent standpoint along the way, but now has also been involved in providing opportunities and playing a part at an administration level, which is a lot higher than we've seen in the past.
Precisely. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have prominent local attorney, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who is also the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, and we have former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker, Mr. Cline, C.G. Glidden Jr., who is a supporter of CONCACAF and a supporter of President Jeff Webb. We're going to take a commercial break at this point in time. We will be back shortly. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett Connor, and in the studio with me this morning discussing the activities of CONCACAF in the Cayman Islands, discussing the achievements, the aspirations and goals of President Jeff Webb. I have in the studio Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who's the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, as well as former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and an ardent supporter of football in the Cayman Islands and CONCACAF, Mr. Cline, C.G. Glidden. Folks, again, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record, and I'll hand over to Ms. Theresa.
Right. When CJ and I met yesterday, we talked very briefly about how we were going to participate to make, first of all, we are aware of the time limitation, and, we want to give the audience as best as we can, a proper overview of what this whole initiative entails. My focus primarily, because of my legal background, will be some of the research that President Webb asked me to do when I came on board. And again, so that you have some sense of how I got involved. In as much as I'm involved with sports integrity, President Webb also looked at the broad background that I had with legal drafting and so on. So whilst CG was on the road and on the trot with some of the lawyers and certainly with President Webb, my view was in the background trying to think of ways in which we could put this whole thing together. Why arbitration? One of the conversations that we had, for example, was the arbitration law that came into effect in 2012, which was based on the United Nations Commission International Trade legislation. And it was one of the most modernized piece of legislation designed to make arbitration cost effective for people, to make it inclusive. And it's not going to necessarily be a court system, but one of the pertinent questions that was driving President Webb's curiosity was how will it impact our economy? How will it impact local people? How will local people benefit? What are the real spin-offs? So again, my perspective is the overall configuration of his vision and trying to make it make sense under some kind of umbrella analysis. He looked at arbitration because, one, it's speedy, and some of the research that I conducted, for example, in Canada, demonstrated how arbitration itself could generate a significant amount of income for the community. In Toronto, there was a study that was done in 2012, and it was determined that it generated over $400 million. Now, I'm not saying that Cayman can compare itself necessarily to Toronto, but we have the infrastructure that you need to develop something as unique and efficient as and can be comparable to other international institutions. We have a set of laws that are legitimate, that are respected. We have the infrastructure in terms of the expertise. We have the lawyers, the accountants, and so on. We have a reputation for delivering top services. And so his question was, how can we use the sports industry, certainly football, to benefit from this? Because it's not everyone, for example, that necessarily want to go to the United States, because ICAS, which is the institution in Switzerland, it commenced, this sort of service in the 1980s when it recognized that so many athletes were getting injured, and there was a fair amount of attrition among lawyers and so on. So they wanted to ensure that you had access, that the athletes had access to proper legal representation. Now, why arbitration? They wanted something that the parties could agree to, because once you when you are a lawyer, you realize that that's one of the major concerns that people have. So one, you wanted access to something that was quick, that was efficient, that could get the job done. It would be in a reputable institution. And this was one of the reasons why when President Webb was doing the trot in South America, they looked at different jurisdictions, but after reviewing and comparing different jurisdictions, they felt that Cayman was the place to go. Not everyone wants necessarily to go to the United States. Mm-hmm. We have to pay taxes, and we have a system here, and this is now being supported and complemented by the new arbitration law that we have developed in 2012 based on what we have in the United Nations. And I'll let CG have a word here.
Sure, go right ahead, CG.
So yeah, I mean, as Theresa said, going back to President Webb and the work that he's doing, and obviously leading into this discussion, it's important to note that while President Webb is working in the region and looking out constantly for the region, he has the support and respect for the great amount of work that he's doing on a worldwide basis, like Theresa talked about, from discrimination, from women's football, for the different areas that he works in, and that has allowed him to make some significant inroads into the region, right, and the benefits for that. And so when we started looking at as a part of his work, he's hosting or co-hosting a major event next year, which is the basically the Latin and South America tournament, the centennial celebration of their tournament. I think it's called Copa Centurio. Yeah. That's going to be in mainly in North America, so mainly in the CONCACAF region. And he's been having significant levels of discussions with CONMEBOL, with the president of CONMEBOL. And so there was a discussion on challenges that they're facing. And one of those challenges is as Theresa mentioned, the arbitration aspect, right, of players. In North America, there's not as much as in Central South America, where we have a significant number of professional players who have contractual disagreements with at different levels. And in the past, they've had to, excuse me, to go to, as was mentioned, the Center for Arbitration for Sports is in Lausanne, Switzerland, with other branch offices that are set up elsewhere. The closest one to us, and the one that's most commonly used has been in New York in the past. And there was a discussion to see, what would be the benefits of having something on this side of the world to service the Americas. And of course, President Webb would have lobbied to get that in Cayman. And so when the idea first came about, he started to talking to people. He talked to Maples because of relationships that are there in terms of financial services industry. Excuse me, with getting to try to measure what the level of interest would be from a financial services center and whether the private sector would see this as something. And of course, as soon as mentioning it to all the firms, I know specifically him having spoke to Maples and having spoke to the firm that I'm at, OG, that there was full support right across the board. Then when it was mentioned to government jumped on board quickly and said, yeah, we'll give it whatever support. Tell us what we need to do. Because OC, in your time in government as well as during mine, there's been a lot of discussion about setting up Cayman as a center for arbitration. Mm-hmm. The challenge has always been, as Theresa said, there's a desire for having, it's been mentioned that litigation is one of the most inefficient ways of dispute resolution. And, people tend to want as much as possible to have a solution that doesn't involve the costly aspects of litigation. And so while there was always a desire and an interest in establishing Cayman as a center for arbitration in general, the concern is that you go through the infrastructure expenses of the establishment, and there's really no guarantee of work that's there. For example, when we have our current judicial system, we have an idea as to, because of the work that actually takes place here or has some connection, some nexus to the Cayman Islands, that there's going to be X amount of work in Cayman. But when it comes to arbitration, you're not really sure as to, who's going to decide to use your location for arbitration depending on the competing jurisdictions and what they offer. Mm-hmm. What we have here is two large sporting organizations, two federations that have come together and said, basically, you establish the infrastructure that is necessary, and we will ensure or assist in making sure that contracts that fall on our respective federations will list Cayman as the designated center for arbitration. All right.
Can I stick a pin, CG, just to ensure that the listening audience get a breath of that? This would include personalities in all of South America and all of the CONCACAF region, which is North America, i.e. Canada, the United States, the Caribbean. So this is a huge landscape in terms of people who will be involved, and Cayman will be the recipient and beneficiaries of the business brought here.
So when we think of contracts, we tend to think of obviously we don't have a lot of professional contracts from a Cayman perspective. And even when we look at from a CONCACAF perspective, when we take North America, Canada, and Mexico out of that mix, the contracts would be limited. Mm-hmm. When we start talking about the contracts for professional athletes coming out of Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay. When we get down, we start seeing that the potential is huge. And so now what Cayman, the opportunity that this provides is Cayman has basically been told, get an attractive center for arbitration established here, and now you will have the benefits of a constant supply of those, right? So instead of wondering which contracts or which arbitration is there, you have an automatic feed pretty much for that. And obviously that can lead to other things, because if you have the infrastructure in place, there's a potential for, arbitration in general at a later point in time.
Okay, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have prominent local attorney, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. We also have Mr. Cline Glidden Jr., who's a former member of the Legislative Assembly. We're talking about integrity in sports and the establishment of the Cayman Islands as an arbitration center for CONCACAF. Please stay tuned. We're going to go to the news now, and we will be back shortly after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who is the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF. We also have with us Mr. Cline C.G. Glidden Jr., former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and an ardent supporter of football in the Cayman Islands, as well as CONCACAF. We're talking about, CONCACAF's activities in the Cayman Islands, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from an article in relation to a decision that was made in relation to establishment of a sports arbitration or football arbitration in the Cayman Islands. It says here, following a meeting in Punta del Este, Uruguay, between CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, which I'm told CONMEBOL is the equivalent, South American equivalent of CONCACAF. It was announced that a committee would be formed to consider establishing the Cayman Islands as the center of arbitration for all football matters within the Americas region. President of CONMEBOL, Juan Angel Napor, explained the significance of having a court of arbitration for sports closer to home, establishing, and this is his quote, establishing a single jurisdiction in the Americas for the purpose of hearing disputes related to football is of the utmost importance to both CONCACAF and CONMEBOL regions. This will provide both confederations with an environment that in which disputes can be arbitrated in a consistent and uniform manner in accordance with internationally accepted standards for arbitration, which is a necessity for us. Other jurisdictions were also considered. However, the Cayman Islands were determined to have the best infrastructure and presented the most complete case for selection. One element that is critical in the selection process for a court of arbitration for sports is the unicitral model law, which has been adopted by the Cayman Islands. And I will skip some of that and say that according to James Bergstrom, who's a partner in a leading law firm in the Cayman Islands, this is good news both for the Cayman Islands and for CONCACAF and CONMEBOL as well. And I must say that while there are allegations, and some people are of the belief that there are some elements in the Cayman Islands who are seeking to export the practice of law, from the Cayman Islands to other jurisdictions. Here we see an initiative to bring the practice of law to the Cayman Islands as well. So that is also quite heartening. And before I go back to our guests, I just want, again, for the benefit of our listening audience, you would have heard Mrs. Pitcairn talk about the court of arbitration for sports, CAS, which is established in Lausanne, Switzerland. And they also have offices that are located in New York, Sydney, Australia, and as I mentioned earlier, Lausanne, Switzerland. And they also have temporary courts that are established in current Olympic host cities as well. But they have drawn a distinction between what the court of arbitration in sports does and what this new court for arbitration for the Caribbean and Central American and South American region, will do as well. I hope that I did a good job in explaining that to our listening audience, Miss Theresa.
Yeah, no, Kaz obviously was the brainchild of the Olympics. The guy in the early 1980s, I can't remember his name, it begins with an S. I'm sleeping with that. That's right. Right. Yeah. So they recognized some of the challenges that we were having. But what we have is this opportunity in Cayman because of the flexible legislation that we have and because of the established legal regime, and as I said, supported by the new arbitration law that we adopted in 2012, which is based on the United Nations. That's the one that you were referring to just now,
yes,
right? For international trade. That kind of bolsters, and not only that, it's not even limited to UNCTRAL. What the Law Commission, when they reviewed this in 2009, considered, they considered other legislation, for example, from Singapore and Hong Kong as well. So our legislation is it encompasses all of the more modernized and more with a view to the future about how arbitration can evolve in a positive way in the Cayman Islands. One of the things that CG mentioned when we were in the break, and I'll take the lead with this, and CG can build on it, because he has been really, really involved with this. There are other firms as well, as he mentioned, that have been supporting the initiative by President Webb. But what we will have is a guaranteed source of income, and I want to really, really expand the breadth of that. And if President Webb did not have the reach and access to so many people, and also the respect that he has been able to develop in his 2 very short years, and I'll say sprint because this guy moves at the speed of lightning. Some of the times I said to him, look, you're harassing me now, no, because he's always, T, you done this, you done this, you done that. And in fact, when this came up, as I said, I started in sports integrity, and, he utilized my background in law as well. His thing was, well, T, this is something I got running here, for the last year or so. I need some help with it as well. We need someone within CONCACAF to have some overview of what is going on in SOF, because it is a CONCACAF initiative. But you not only have a gentleman that has the reach, but the respect that this man has garnered in 2 years. Look at I don't know if you guys keep abreast of what's going on, but very recently he executed that agreement with Bank of Nova Scotia to develop a really close relationship between CONCACAF and the Bank of Nova Scotia with a certain branding. They were really, really impressed with Jeff's vision about changing the whole landscape and history of CONCACAF. Like I said, he has moved very, very quickly to develop a system that has proper governance. It's transparent. I know he's moving as best as he can to deal with some of the historic issues or the residue of the challenges from the past. And that takes time, and it costs a lot of money, to get these things done and get these things properly in place. So, but his eyes are never far from the Cayman Islands. This is a new area of law that many Caymanians will have access to. It's new. We can get them trained up, and I'm hoping that CG will talk a little bit about that, because this is something I know he's really, really excited about as well. But it's just not limited to lawyers. It's going to affect our stay, or we're going to have more people, more prestige. My son, we were talking about football. My son is, maybe I shouldn't say too much, but he has a real interest in football, and so does his dad. His grandfather used to play nationally for Scotland, so there is this genetic thing that's going on. So my twins now are very, very involved with soccer. But when Jeff brought the meeting here with the CEO, I think it was last year or the year before, my son wanted to meet X, Y, and Z. He says, Mom, these are my Shaka, the guy Shaka. He knows all about these guys. So the prestige that Jeff brings to these islands single-handedly because of his reach, and to transform our economy. I mean, it is just magnificent. So we talk about kids as well. Because of the access that we will now have to people from South America and so on, we can now even change our curriculum in the high school to ensure that languages is key. So this is just one way of showing you how we're going to have to think long and hard and develop a proper economic development plan which looks to the future to make sure that we have not only the legal infrastructure that's going to deal with arbitration, because as CG rightly says, it doesn't have to be limited to sports arbitration, which is what we're now dealing with, because we want to make sure and get that up and running and done properly. But it's going to have tentacles that go way beyond the people in the tax industry, the people in the restaurant business. Everyone will be affected.
And while before CG comes in, I just want to throw this little punch in again also.
Oh dear.
That while we have issues like Operation Tempura that we still don't know a whole lot that we would want to know about and we should know about, but it appears that part of that plan was to try to bring down the judiciary here in the Cayman Islands. Here we have now an emphasis on the judicial process in the Cayman Islands and highlighting the integrity of it, whereas, it appears as if our own mother country, was one that was seeking to tear our judiciary down.
And also, just to pick up on the points that Theresa touched on, and obviously we need to spend some time looking at those opportunities, but I think it's important for us to, like she said, look at the far reach, the respect that President Webb has brought to the position, which allows him to do things like this. Like she mentioned early on, it wasn't a simple process to get Cayman chosen, right? We have other competing jurisdictions that would have wanted to have this opportunity. But again, it speaks to the respect that President Webb has across the federation. So the South American Football Federation, CONMEBOL, obviously there's a relationship there. And when they sat and had, discussions on a variety of topics, obviously this was one of them, and they could come to an agreement. It again goes into the level of commitment that has to be made. Like Theresa said, Jeff is all over, right? So obviously the press release from that one has him in Uruguay.
Uruguay, yes.
And after that, we know he had to travel to New Zealand for some games that were going on there, and so he's spends quite a bit of time on an airplane, and is communicating with his team, right, from in between those travels, because like she said, he's always working towards expanding the sport, expanding the opportunities, just looking after the best interests of players and trying to deal with the challenges, some of those from a historical standpoint. But when it was mentioned about Cayman being the center of arbitration, as you mentioned, there's support from the financial services industry. And I can remember, James is actually my senior regional partner for OJ, and his comment to me was, when there was a discussion, me and him and Jeff at the time, and Jeff said, "Do you support that?" And he said, "Yeah, for the Cayman Islands, total independent as to what my firm decides to do." Right, but just from a Cayman Islands perspective, this is great for Cayman, the opportunities that this will provide. And Theresa touched on the point of the potential. While this isn't only an opportunity for the legal profession, it is also a great opportunity for young attorneys who are coming in and starting their careers at this point in time, and who are coming in many cases in the financial services industry. But they're looking and they're saying, but we're so far behind in terms of experience that are there. Are we really going to have an opportunity? Right? We've always had those discussions.
Yeah. Haven't gone through the local law school here. Do you see the potential also for the curriculum to change to a certain extent to focus also on arbitration?
Well, interesting that you mentioned the curriculum. I mean, while we haven't yet had those discussions, right? So like Theresa said, from her position and involvement there, and in mine, working with one of the private firms but having had a commitment from that firm to actually be able to work with CONCACAF in terms of this initiative. One of the things that we've already started looking at is an opportunity to get, whether it's CONCACAF and government, to sponsor and to create, by sponsoring, create opportunities for Caymanians to get exposure to arbitration, right? And to get a level of training in arbitration. And we'll have to decide how far along we go, right? But again, like we were saying, when lawyers are coming in and they're looking for areas of law to specialize in, right? This is another potential opportunity. Now, we don't want to streamline it to as a benefit to simply, like I said, the legal profession. We mentioned that we're talking about having numbers of people, in many instances, high net worth individuals coming to Cayman, which when we drive people into Cayman for related purposes, they're going to come here, they're going to have, like I said, transportation. They're going to have to stay in hotels. They're going to have to take flights here, right? They're going to use taxi services. They're going to use restaurants. And as normally happens in Cayman, when people come to Cayman and are exposed to it for whatever reason, whether it's even only for a few hours on a cruise ship, they fall in love with the place and they decide that this is a great place to be. And so, again, this is exposure to bring people, an opportunity to bring people and expose them to the many benefits of Cayman and provide a service. And Cayman is known as a service industry, whether it's financial services or whether it's tourism service, to provide the highest level of services. And so that's where this opportunity, like Theresa said, we'll have a guaranteed stream of business, because two of the federations are saying, we're going to name Cayman as a center for arbitration. Once you do your part, create that center that allows it to be selected, that we'll send the business to you.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mrs. Theresa Pitcairn, and we have Mr. Cline Glidden Jr., CG, and we're talking about the Cayman Islands being chosen as a home for a court of arbitration for sports. We ask you to stay tuned. We're going to be back shortly where we will be discussing more of this, talking about the benefits to the Cayman Islands and also the achievements of the president of CONCACAF, Mr. Jeff Orrett. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where we are joined by Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who is the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, and we have Mr. Cline Glidden Jr., CG, who is a former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker, now at Algiers, right, CG, and an ardent supporter of CONCACAF and football in the Cayman Islands. We're discussing the choice of Cayman as a home for a court of arbitration for sports. And I just want to say that while President Jeff Webb would have been somewhat instrumental in having Cayman chosen to a certain extent, that was only a part of it, because it is also Cayman's reputation as a good jurisdiction, a safe jurisdiction, as a stable jurisdiction as far as governments are concerned. All of those attributes as well helped to make Cayman so attractive. And while I have the mic, I also want to say that, when we talk about President Jeff Webb and his accomplishments, every time he appears, let's say, for instance, for something in Jamaica, his presence is highlighted. Whomever he's talking to there, wherever he goes, that is highlighted. And we need to do more of that in the Cayman Islands as well as highlighting him. Look at a gentleman who has come from a local football organization as the president of the Cayman Islands Football Association. Now the president of CONCACAF and a vice president of FIFA, and a name that has featured last year quite prominently for the presidency of FIFA as well. And I think he has made a wise decision in terms of not contesting that presidency at this point in time. And I have no doubt, and I think others have no doubt, that his time, will come as well, for that presidency. Comments?
Yeah, well, see, I think the point that you made. I think Jeff is. I think we're proud of the fact and the respect that he gets on a worldwide level on a sport that is the number one sport in the world, and like I said, one of the largest businesses in the world. And we see that, as we were talking about on the break, when we have a person from an association and from the Cayman Islands, which is seen as traditional being small, but like we like to say that we're small, but we punch above our weight. We see the amount of work and commitment that Jeff must have displayed to not only for us to be proud, but for the rest of his peers in the sporting world to give him the respect that they give. I was privileged to actually accompany him to the UK recently for a leaders conference. So it was a leaders conference that he was asked to speak to at Chelsea's football club in London, and when Jeff speaks, obviously the world of sports and specifically the world of football, they listen. And as was mentioned at the summit here, there was a bit of I guess jesting going on with President Blatter, mentioning the potential for President Webb and where he was going to go. And Jeff has made the comments. I mean, there's been a significant push, especially when we talk about reforms that are necessary, right? Because when he took over CONCACAF, it was in quite a bit of turmoil. And obviously in 2 years, the levels of reform that he's been able to introduce and the respect that CONCACAF now has as one of the confederations of FIFA. Obviously the similarities, people that are calling for reform within FIFA have made that call and made suggestions as to what role Jeff could play in taking that up, and he has made a decision to say that he's still working on CONCACAF, and that's what he's concentrating on. Like you said, we're very hopeful that his time will come, and that he'll continue to move, and up the ranks from a football level, but where he's reached now, obviously, creates a significant amount of opportunities and benefit for the Cayman Islands and as for the region. And we see that it's not limited to that, because on a worldwide scale, he's taken on very, very challenging areas that are faced with the sports, from, as Theresa mentioned, from integrity to discrimination, to women's football. And so he's doing quite an amazing job.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as legislation is concerned for the Cayman Islands, and I'll use as an example without calling any names, but we have seen other entities establishing themselves in the Cayman Islands, and as a result of that being established here, have either sought changes in legislation, sought concessions from government. We've seen in instances, for instance, where medical medical practitioners law was amended to be able to accommodate doctors to be able to practice here in the Cayman Islands. Will there be any necessity for any concessions from government in relation to the establishment of a court here?
If by concessions you mean that we will have to take a more flexible approach to certain issues, I think we will. Because if you want to develop this and make it make this a seamless transition for people that are traveling, you're gonna have to take a look at the work permit situation, and it will have to. I just hate to even get into that, because once you open that up, you open it like a ball of acrimony, because we've played around with this legislation for so often. So many times. But for something like this, where it's clear that it's a win-win situation, people that are coming in from, say, Paraguay or Chile and are wanting to come here to use the arbitration facilities that we have here, they're not going to want to come here and get all caught up with whether or not they have a work permit or not. And they're really only going to be here for a while to have their matters resolved. Mm-hmm. But with that comes obviously opportunities for people who may have an interest in purchasing property. So the spin-off is, in my mind, the win, it far exceeds whatever restrictions or whatever changes that we might have to make to the immigration law, the flexibilities that we might have to make. And it has to be something that is robust. We can't think insular. We have to start thinking global. It's like the way people view Jeff. In as much as we love him, and, socially, I call him Jeff. When I'm with him, I call him Jeff. When I speak about him, I refer to him as President Webb because that is who he is.
Yes.
So, I have that respect, and I think we now have to start moving forward, and thinking global. And I think that's one of the things that comes to mind in terms of flexibilities that we might have to make in order to accommodate this. I don't know what CG's views are.
We have one caller online, so we're going to grab that caller now. Let's see what that caller has to say. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Okay, good morning to Miss Theresa Pitcairn and
Morning.
CG.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, CG, soon I get time, I'll come look for you.
All right, buddy.
Okay. Well, we do have talent in the Cayman Islands when it comes to football. Our young people, they just need the opportunity and being able to enter through those doors that they need to in order for them to become the professionals that they're striving to be. And the right example we have for that is that we are now able to watch Miss Grace Geely
In
television.
Empire.
On television. And the choice of CG and you, Miss Pitcairn, is something that will strengthen the integrity of football in the Caribbean.
Thank you very much for that.
With your legal background and with CG's experience and knowledge of football, because CG, that is his sport from day one.
So you tell me.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much,
Thanks a
caller.
lot.
Thank you very much. CG?
Yeah, obviously that caller is a lifelong friend of mine who knows my background. So now he confirmed, Theresa, that I used to be a football player. But yeah, I think his point is well taken in terms of Cayman having a lot of talent in multiple areas. He mentioned being able to watch Grace on TV.
And I wanted to put that plug in because she's from Bordentown.
well, since we're plugging, I think we've seen significant advances with some of our young people. And he mentioned giving our youth an opportunity, and we see the great things going on with for example, Sebastian Martinez, right?
Excellent work.
And those opportunities, and we see that when it comes to opportunities and interest and support. Right, his parents have been, supporting and pushing, and as a young man, he's a great example for things, amongst others, things that can be achieved and opportunities that exist, but we need to be willing. I mean, I can remember when they were talking about sending him off, and you look at him, he was small in stature, relatively young, and you wonder, how he's going to fit in going into England, and whether he's going to be able to survive, and you just see from report to report. Continued improvements from a scholastic and component straight to the skill and sporting side as well. So I think the caller was correct in saying that Cayman has significant talent. We just need to make sure to continue to provide those opportunities.
Okay. Now, talking locally as well, we've seen, for instance, efforts to extend sports to the sister islands as well, and in particular football. And we saw some of there was a tournament in Cayman last year, and some of those matches were played in the BRAC as well. Do you have anything to add in terms of what is happening locally?
Yeah, I'm not as involved I'm not a part of that committee except for having discussions with some of the individuals on there, and offering to play whatever role that we can. But what I do know is that this event, the upcoming one, is expected to be even bigger than the last. I think there's just as many or more teams. I think I've been hearing that there's a very positive inclusion that will even raise the levels higher and create more of an interest in terms of the teams that will be participating. But what I do know is from talking over and being privy to some of the discussions, that there is still the commitment to the sister islands, and that there will be once again some significant games being played there. I know Vice President Bruce Blake and I think the head of the youth federation or committee is Mark Scotland. Those members, I'm sure, will have more of an update in terms of the upcoming tournament themselves, and part of the organizing committee. I'm sure they have some exciting news to give as soon as possible. But as far as I understand, the concentration and commitment to the sister islands is still there.
Okay, Mr. Theresa, from can for the benefit of our listening audience, can you give us a sort of picture of what a court of arbitration, would look like in the Cayman Islands? How would it encompass? We've spoken, about is it unicitral? Is that how will that encompass local legislation?
Right, and that's one of the things CG and I spent some time discussing last evening. Put in some kind of plan in place, and making sure that we are working harmoniously with all of the stakeholders. I know there have been, the firms have been very, very helpful in assisting President Webb with developing this venture. One of the things that CG raised yesterday, for example, when we were talking about where for example, are you going to put it? And the process involved with getting that together. Also, the process involved in putting in the proper legislation or relevant legislation to deal with that. Are we going to have it on a sort of a tribunal level? I mean, those are things that are to be discussed with other people once, we get this, once we have the kind of focus that we need now that it's been disclosed to the public. I noticed in the article President Webb said that this is going to be put together within a couple of months. And there's a Jamaican song that came to mind about Arlene. But, Arlene, I must have dreamed you the dream. But, we work hard to make these things happen. But we also have to consult the government to see when they will be, able to bring it to the House and to debate it and that sort of thing. One of the things I think that might make this a little easier is that I think folks have agreed to do the drafting themselves, and that, of course, will reduce some of the time because the government often have a lot of backlog with their own stuff. So we're hoping that, people will be very cooperative. They will work really hard, focus on this, develop timelines and make sure those timelines are consistent with governments, try to speak to all members of government, because this is really a win for everyone to see that, it's not distracted by, craziness that, prevents these things from becoming a reality, and try to talk as much as possible about how this is really going to benefit the islands. So that's really a broad brush that I can give you, but it gives you a sense of the sort of work that has to take place behind the scenes.
And so just to pick up on that,
sure,
like Theresa said, there's the announcement that has been made, right? But there has to be the framework and infrastructure there now that will give the parties to arbitration a level of confidence, right? So, like we said, what immigration challenges that may be, what infrastructural challenges this is only going to work when parties are comfortable, but that there's a level of independence and a level of expertise that is going to give them a level of confidence to choose Cayman right? Or that when a choice is made to be in Cayman for arbitration. And so there'll be discussion with government, how involved will government be, whether it's going to be a private sector initiative like the one in Switzerland, which isn't necessarily a government entity, right? Which could be a company that's established outside of government, has the oversight, has the, there's an issue with the judicial relationship as to the enforcement of arbitral awards and them being, to the courts of the Cayman Islands. But then there's also the international challenges, because this doesn't exist now. So what ends up happening now, the confederations of FIFA, when contracts are made, the place of arbitration or the court of arbitration is already established as being in Switzerland.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
So there's going to have to be a discussion, right, with FIFA. They will have to be satisfied that they're now able to say to their confederations and allow the confederations for those contracts to be changed when contracts to those federations to now set Cayman as a preferred jurisdiction for arbitration.
Or they may even choose, if somebody's from Brazil, they may choose to have the governing law as Brazilian law.
Exactly.
So, there's going to be all kinds of challenges with this. But I am absolutely sure that people are sensible enough to try, because you get the big picture. People are sensible enough to try and work together to develop something that's flexible and is accommodating as well.
So now what you have is two large federations, CONMEBOL and CONCACAF, basically coming out publicly and saying, listen, Cayman, we see the benefits of this. We see the benefits in your jurisdiction. And now it's up to Cayman to put something in place,
exactly,
right, that is going to accommodate that decision, right? They're not saying we're going to bring it there with whatever you're doing. We're saying we have the confidence that you will be able to put something in place that will give us that level of confidence. And so now we'll go out and work. And where Jeff has tasked, like Theresa said, to get that done in a few months, that was mentioned, right? It expects to be a working body, a group of people coming together within the various disciplines and identifying those challenges and putting a path ahead that identifies and says, this is the legislative framework that needs to be amended. This is the infrastructure aspect that has to be done. This is a structure that's going to be there. We have the level of support from private sector and from government, and now we're comfortable with moving forward and proposing Cayman as that center, right? But we've already gotten a pre-commitment from two large federations that say, and like we said, when we do that, there's a potential benefit of North American sports as well, right? We don't have that commitment now. Obviously, Jeff wasn't able to give a commitment on their behalf, but what he's been able to do is get a commitment from his organization, his federation, as well as the South American Federation, CONMEBOL, to say, build it pretty much, and we'll come and use your facility, which is an opportunity that is immeasurable.
How much will it involve reinventing the wheel as opposed to?
Not a lot, because we have legislation that we can borrow. We already have the arbitration law, which is very, very flexible, very accommodating. We have supporting legislation that we can use and rely on. It's really a question, as CG rightly said just now, getting the body together, discussing it, talking it through, making sure that people know what their responsibilities are, ensuring that government is always on board, keeping them involved in the process, and then determining where it's going to be housed and so on. Once the schematics are in place and we do a further presentation, then people will say, well, okay, we gave you the preliminary okay, now is the real deal, because you've clearly demonstrated that you guys are ready for business.
Okay, and speaking, we've heard the Chief Justice talk about judicial accommodations, courthouses and stuff like that. How much would that contribute to it as well? Because obviously, they're in extended offices now, buildings other than the main courthouse itself. How much would that assist in the process?
Remember, it's a separate system, right?
Yeah.
So the court system that the Chief Justice is dealing with will be separate and distinct from the arbitration one that we're speaking of. So that will also be one of the issues that people have to decide on. Where is it going to be housed and the terms under which it's going to be housed. And in my view, and it's a personal view, I would like this to be something that pays for itself, so that you won't have to be worried about costs.
Okay.
So
okay.
when somebody's going and like I said, with arbitration, it's something that is agreed between the parties. So you let them know what is the cost to do the arbitration here in Cayman, and so that people, my apologies. People are aware of what is involved, and ensure that the fees are paid on time, what is required, and to ensure that it is self-sustainable.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrett. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, prominent local attorney who's also the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF. We also have Mr. Cline C.G. Glidden Jr., who's a former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly as well, working with a local law firm, Ogiers, at this point in time, and is an ardent supporter of football in the Cayman Islands, as well as being a former player himself. We're talking about the establishment of a court for arbitration for football, for sports in the Cayman Islands. We're going to go to headline news at this point in time. That will be for a short break, and we will be back. Please stay tuned to 89.9 Radio Cayman and For the Record. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're on the final leg of For the Record for today. That final leg will continue to consist of our two guests, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who's the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, and Mr. Cline C.G. Glidden Jr., who is the former member of the Legislative Assembly representing the District of West Bay, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and now himself a local attorney. And we are talking about plans to establish a football court in the Cayman Islands. We have one caller online, so we're going to grab that caller now. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor and your esteemed guest.
Good morning, Miss Suzanne. How are you?
How are you? I am good. I just wanted to congratulate your guests on the innovative work that they're doing and bring such an interesting topic to the country and future business. And I just wanted them to know that a lot of government contracts and a lot of private contracts have the arbitration clauses in them already. And the fact that, if arbitration comes up, the question does arise, how are we going to hold it and where are we going to hold it? So there's already an existing need for a broad-based arbitration system in Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on my way to court, so I'm sorry I'm sounding
That's okay.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, I just wanted to congratulate everyone. And it's a very interesting topic. Take care.
Yeah,
Thank you very
Suzanne.
much. Sorry you can't listen, longer, but you got to take care of court first.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we before we respond to that, let's take the other caller that we have online as well. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm CJ. How are you?
Good, doing well.
It's nice to hear that, though, for this island.
Thanks, buddy.
And I respect my president for the Football Association, for the CONCACAF, Mr. Jeff Webb, who know where he's coming from, and he never forgot about the island. So we congratulate him, and I hope that everything works out well for us, and things better for our future football players also. Because when we used to play football, we don't have these opportunities and stuff like that, so we should take advantage of everything that's going on right now. And respect for our president, because I know some people are not going to say anything really. Some people are going to say some bad things about him, but we don't worry about that. We worry about the future. But we have to worry about other people getting corrupted in it too also, so I'll be careful with that part also. So you all have a blessed day. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank you very
again.
much for that, caller, folks.
Yeah, Suzanne mentioned that there's a need for a proper arbitration system, and she's right. In fact, when shortly after the article went live, I had a few people call me in the legal industry asking me, about this particular initiative and whether or not it could be broadened. My view was that it's a CONCACAF-driven initiative, certainly for now, and that there's no harm with people having conversations about synergies. I was not in a position necessarily to speak to the broadening and the widening of this particular effort. So my view, like I said, although when I spoke to Prez about it yesterday, he is open to matters that benefit the Cayman Islands. And as long as it makes sense, it's something that is coherent, he would gladly support that. But where we stand right now is that this is a CONCACAF-driven exercise, and the focus is primarily on sports, unless CG knows otherwise.
No, I think that there's nothing to stop. There's nothing to stop us, as Suzanne rightly said. I mean, we make provisions in our local laws now, but the question always comes up whether there's an infrastructure there to do it, whether there's the level of expertise locally, whether you're going to go and whether it's beneficial to go and get arbitrators that have that expertise. What this initiative does, it says, we're giving you an incentive. We're saying to you, this is a separate, a book of business, if we call it that is out there, that we're willing to commit to give to the Cayman Islands. This is an incentive now to go ahead and establish the facilities, the infrastructure in place that we can utilize the Cayman Islands. And when you get that established, this is the amount of business that we're saying we will drive to Cayman, right? But it doesn't eliminate the opportunities for the creation of or the utilization of those facilities for other things, right? And I think that's the point that President Webb is making, to say, if there's some way of us collaborating together in terms of working and using similar resources, whether it's legislative resources, and in my discussions with the government, it's a similar thing to say, we're quite happy for the private sector to drive this along. So this isn't coming at the expense of saying it has to be arbitration for sports and nothing else. Basically, this is what the president has control of, and he's saying, as an initiative, this is what I'm able to deliver to you with myself and my other colleagues in the respective federations that are there, the confederations, in this place, CONMEBOL. But that doesn't stop anybody else from, like I said, deciding that we're going to expand it, we're going to broaden it. And the point that Theresa made is that, he isn't against working with that, but he can't come in and say we're going to guarantee you X amount of business in that way. Whereas in this one, he's saying our contracts, the CONMEBOL contracts, those will designate Cayman. And again, it's for us to be creative in Cayman and to get the brains together and to decide how best to use that. But the drive, the initiative at this point, Theresa's instructions, my instructions are going to be working towards it, based on what we have some level of control over.
Well, if we look at Cayman in the 70s, and we creating a niche for the financial services industry, there is no doubt that looking at our arbitration as well, that we can probably create something that is unique, to the Cayman Islands. Some smart lawyer may be able to look at something and say, here we can make this, fit the Cayman Islands context, make it unique to the Cayman Islands. But my question is, Switzerland is not necessarily a cheap place, to live and to work. Neither are the Cayman Islands. How much will the cost of doing business in the Cayman Islands factor, into people's decision to choose the Cayman Islands as the venue for their arbitration?
So say, if I start off on this discussion, I think arbitration is definitely one of the reasons for the selection of arbitration versus the court system and the general litigation process in settling of disputes is cost. right? That's a consideration for them to take. So it's cost, independence, dependability, right? There's the factors that ease of access, time, right, which is associated to the whole cost component. So it's going to be important for us to set a structure in place that is going to be predictable, right? So that no one wants any uncertainties. So people want to know upfront pretty much what it's going to cost. They want to know how long it's going to take, and especially when you're talking about disputes that could be suspensions, for example. A player could be suspended. They're not earning a living. They don't want to be sitting on a roster that says, well, you're going to get a hearing in 6 months' time, right? The other aspect of arbitration that is important is because it allows the parties to choose who's going to hear, right? And so if it's a specific discipline, for example, whether it's medical related, as we discussed earlier, right? You can bring someone who's an arbitrator who has experience in medical doping, for example, right? Whereas you wouldn't necessarily in a traditional court system. There would be a bit of a challenge whether to find a judge or a jury with specific expertise, right? And so there's going to be a pooling of expertise when we look at arbitration, right? And again, depending on the quality of that pool and the arbitrators that can be chosen, right, will allow the parties to feel a level of comfort to say that there's wide-ranging and broad-based expertise in that pool of arbitrators that allows us to feel confident that we will get a fair hearing in light of our matter. So cost is going to be a factor. And again, this isn't an initiative. CONCACAF isn't doing this from a commercial standpoint or from a money-making standpoint. They're not proposing that this is going to be a center of finance for them, right? It's to facilitate and make it as neutral as possible. And again, that's one of the challenges we're faced with, finding a location. There was a suggestion made that depending on the level, there's a certain amount of prestige to that, and you may, depending on the demand, you may be able to go to the existing firms and say, we want you to sponsor, give a commitment for sponsoring X amount of hearings per year, or one of the facilities that has one of the companies that has facilities that could be used. But all those are considerations you're going to have to be taken. But in light of what you asked, it has to be done in as cost efficient a manner as possible to make it remain attractive.
Okay, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. We're discussing the establishment of a court for arbitration in the Cayman Islands for sports, for football. That discussion has taken place with Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who is the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, and Mr. Cline, C.G. Glidden Jr., who's a former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and local attorney with OJs. We're going to go to our final break. We have one caller on line. We're going to ask that caller to remain patient just for a few minutes because we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're going to go straight to the phone lines now because time is drawing near. So we're going to take our call on our caller. Good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, sir, to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
I was called by first name, so good morning, Theresa.
Morning, Ms. Daphne.
Morning, Mr.
And good morning to you, Orrett.
Good morning, Ms. Daphne.
This is a very incredible opportunity, actually. I think that Cayman has been chosen for the football dispute court, and I can see not the benefits being many, not least of which is that it certainly highlights the confidence that these very prestigious and important football associations have in this jurisdiction, that they would choose this little place. And I also see that particularly if they're, very, very important disputes that have to be settled, there's certainly the benefits of many individuals, I guess, who would be attending those particular sessions and having to come here. You can see the spin-off with all that we could benefit from the hotel industry and the airlines and everything else, and the individuals coming here and seeing Cayman, and of course we would benefit from the what they would spend here. But everyone who comes here and gets a very positive impression of who we are and what we're all about, certainly it is a great way for us, for people all over the world, to know what we're all about. So I think just the fact that this little island has been chosen for this very important, the fact that there are many big places, because it covers North, South America, Central America, and football and other sporting activities has become very, very big in the world. So I can see this. So I wish you all the best in getting all this set up. Before I hang up, CG, I hope that last night's session was very good. I apologize that I was unable to be there last night because of another commitment, but I certainly hope that that session at the town hall regarding, being able to spread the word about prostate and colon cancer, which is totally different subject. But again, what a miracle that you were able to be there and share in that as well. So I pray God's blessing on you, and I hope that this new island being chosen as the new location is going to prove very, very beneficial in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thanks so much, Mr.
CG, you mentioned some of the questions that are likely to be asked in terms of when an individual or an organization decides that they're going to choose a particular jurisdiction, for arbitration, and one of those things had to do with timeliness. How long it's going to take for my case to be heard. And I'm looking here on a website for the Court of Arbitration for Sports, and they have their hearings listed, for the various months. How much will the current ability of arbitration courts to deal with issues, their caseload affect? Again, a new jurisdiction a new center coming online.
It's a unique opportunity. In what you normally find, for example, in our local courts, they have an organized list that they submit and they circulate. They now circulate it to all the law firms, and people know when they're supposed to appear. This is going to be completely different because this is multi-jurisdictional, and it's also multilingual, it's also multicultural, and Cayman will be the hub that's essentially going to organize those cases, list those cases, and so on when they're supposed to appear. So that in itself, OC, is a whole area and a new career area for persons who are interested. So when we looked at it, I thought that, I don't think that we got the real breadth and scope of what this can actually entail. I didn't really appreciate it until I started doing the research. I went on CAS, their website, to see what they do, and then I went on the website for the ones that they have in Toronto and New York. It's a whole bunch of stuff, and that's also going to be a part of the conversation that we're going to have when we're developing this plan, because those things have to be taken into consideration. And who will fund. It's a lot. Is all I can say, and I don't know if CG wants to add to that. But when we looked at it, I thought we looked at it in a pretty narrow scope. But the more and more I read about it and started to embrace the whole concept, the more I looked at different websites to see the configuration, it is really huge.
Yeah, I agree with Theresa. I think that that is huge. It's really, it's pretty much limitless. It depends on what limits we want to place on it, right?
I think so.
In
Yeah.
terms of where we want to go and what we think that we can handle. And it was suggested, like you said, you concentrate on one area because you could get overwhelmed by taking on too much. And obviously, President Webb has given some tight timelines as to when he expects it to be up and going.
And he means it,
I'm sure he does.
So it's but I think while the challenges are significant, the opportunities are like you said, limitless, and so we just need to be ready to embrace those and work together with private sector and with government to ensure. Picking up on that point. There is some work, as Suzanne said, there is more of a demand, and there has been some level of interest and work pretty much behind the scenes in terms of arbitration in Cayman, inclusion in contracts, and trying to move more towards some sort of alternative dispute resolution than what was traditionally seen. And there is an arm of, Cayman has its own council, I think it's called, of arbitrators. And we see that there is an announcement for the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, which is the international organization, along with Appleby, one of the local law firms, who has some arbitration training being held in Cayman during February the 20th to February the 22nd, right? Not specific for sports arbitration or football arbitration, but just in general terms. Interest. There are quite a bit of the firms, as we know, we have quite a bit of foreign expertise, and when those individuals come here, some of them have some level of arbitration experience and arbitration training as well. But it's interesting to see that like I said, during February the 20th to 22nd, here in Cayman, there's 3 different arbitration seminars that are being held that will lead to some international recognitions in terms of arbitrators, right? So I think we have an introduction to international arbitration, and then we have a road to a fellow and then a member in terms of the different levels of arbitration recognition. And having looked at that, Theresa, like I said, started a discussion to, while this one is here in February the 20th to the 22nd, the possibility of looking, like I said, of getting CONCACAF or getting government or combining to sponsor that. So again, that we can expose and give some introductions to young Caymanian attorneys, for example, who might be looking for an area of expertise or a niche to start getting into some level of arbitration. Yeah. So,
although it's not limited to lawyers,
right?
Non-lawyers can participate as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting component that's important for us to pick up on when we talk about arbitrators. Again, the parties will choose who they want, right? So if there's somebody who has a specific expertise that is non-legal, right? The arbitrators can choose that person. So again, like Theresa said, when it's not limited to people that want to get into the potential for being an arbitrator, it isn't limited to lawyers.
Okay, we have about 1 minute left for you to give final words to our listening audience. Start with you, Ms. Theresa.
If I may, this is a truly unique opportunity for us to move forward, and I am hoping that those of us that are listening to the conversation that we're having today will actually pay close attention to what we're trying to share. And it's in as much as we focused on arbitration and developing it as a new, unique area of law, but that people can see the spin-offs as well, and that Caymanians in particular will choose to focus on this area, especially if there are persons that are interested, not necessarily interested in the law itself, but to see all the larger ramification and benefits. We keep saying that, we don't have any opportunities and so on and so forth. Now, this is one that's been hand-delivered to you, literally. It's being given to you in your plate. Let us start, thinking about what we are going to do to take advantage of this truly unique opportunity. Not many people, for example, will be President Webb, will have. Notice President Webb came from Cayman, a small little place that nobody, who would ever think that someone from our community would rise to the heights that Jeff has to be in charge of CONCACAF with a view to be the president of FIFA. So it is unique. Let's embrace it. Let's all be positive and support this particular exercise.
CG, you too. And I just want to say that, someone emailed me and said, FYI, and this came, earlier in the show, CG also was a star player with Scholars Football. And I say, before I mention it, I want to confirm that that is the case. And an opportunity for you to wrap up.
Yeah, obviously. I don't know about being a star player, but I can say I was a player. But yeah, I've participated. And interestingly, going back quite a while, I actually sat as a vice president of Cayman Islands Football Association along with Jeff, Mark, Darrell, Peter, many years ago. The big thing at that stage was the Shell Cup. We hosted the Shell Cup, and we had actually good results on the field and off the field during those times. The big thing I remember was when the Cayman national team actually beat Jamaica.
Yes.
So that was. But anyway, that was long. Now we moved forward, and what we're seeing, as Theresa mentioned, is these opportunities that have been provided. I think one of the callers mentioned. Like they said, all the stars have to align, right? And so we have to be in a unique place, in a stable environment where people have confidence, and that we need to have people in a position of authority and influence that can bring those opportunities. And we have, in this particular case, all the stars aligning, and this opportunity being, like Theresa said, delivered on a platter for us. And it's important for us. I'm just excited to be given a role to play and a part to play in that. And we look forward to working together with President Webb, his organizations, both locally and internationally, to help deliver on this initiative and others, because we know that him being the dynamic person that he is, while this announcement has been made, there's other things in the work as well, right? So Cayman is poised to benefit from that relationship, and this is a good example as to the potential benefits that could come from those relationships. And so we just need to continue to work together and strive to make sure that as great an opportunity as possible is afforded to our people, whether it's on the field of play or off the field. Right. And we're committed to doing that, and we look forward to continuing that work.
Well, I want to thank you, both of you, and certainly President Jeff Webb, for his efforts and for the efforts that you're undertaking, for this venture to take place here in the Cayman Islands as well. Folks, I just want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we had Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, who's the Deputy Director of Sports Integrity for CONCACAF, and Mr. Cline C.G. Glidden Jr., former member of the Legislative Assembly, former Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and now working at OJ's a law firm in the Cayman Islands. We've been talking about the Cayman Islands being chosen as a place for a court for arbitration in sports, and as you've heard from them, a terrific opportunity for the Cayman Islands, and an honor to be chosen as well. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I would urge you to support a local charity, to donate to a local charity. I leave you with the words of Mr. Billy Withers. Lean on me. I want to remind you, again, continue to listen to Radio Cayman. You can listen to Sterling Dwayne Ebanks this afternoon on Talk Today. And on Monday morning on For the Record, we will have Minister Kurt Tibbetts, who will be talking about the agriculture show, which will take place on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, February 18th. Thank you again for listening in. Continue to stay tuned to Radio Cayman. Stay safe. And have a great day.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.